The crystal goblet shattered against the marble floor, a sound as loud as the crack of my own breaking heart. Red wine, the color of blood, bled across the pristine white stone, crawling toward the Alpha King's immaculate black boots. I flinched, my body coiling in on itself, bracing for the inevitable blow. A gasp rippled through the grand hall, 100 pairs of eyes fixing on me, the clumsy, mute Omega who had just humiliated our pack in front of royalty. Alpha Valerius, my tormentor, shot me a look of pure loathing, his knuckles white where he gripped his throne. But the blow never came. Instead, a low, guttural growl echoed from the dais, a sound so primal it vibrated through the soles of my worn slippers and up my spine. I dared to lift my gaze from the spreading stain of wine. The Alpha King, Kalen, the most powerful wolf on the continent, was staring at me, not with anger, not with disgust, but with an intensity that burned through me, a look of shocked, feral recognition. His silver eyes, cold as a winter moon moments before, now blazed with a possessive fire. He rose from his throne in a single fluid motion, his immense presence silencing the whispers in the hall. He descended the steps, each footfall a drumbeat marking my doom, or perhaps something else entirely. He stopped just before the puddle of wine, his shadow engulfing me. Then, in a voice that was both a command and a prayer, a word rumbled from his chest, a word that changed everything. Mate. And from the silent, barren prison of my throat, a sound I hadn't made in a decade tore its way out, a raw, dusty whisper that was undeniably mine. No. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected claims, broken bonds, or awakenings under the moon, subscribe and stay close. Now, back to the scene. The single word hung in the air, fragile and yet defiant. It was the first sound I had uttered since the curse took hold when I was 8 years old, the day my parents were murdered and my world fell silent. My hand flew to my throat, feeling the alien vibration of my own vocal cords. It felt like swallowing fire and ice. My eyes, wide with terror, were locked on the Alpha King. His face was a mask of stunned disbelief, the hard lines of his jaw softening as he processed the sound, my sound. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, chaos erupted. "A trick!" Alpha Valerius roared, surging to his feet. His daughter, Selena, who had made my silent life a living hell, pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me. "She's a witch, a charlatan. She has never spoken a word. She's trying to bewitch the Alpha King." The pack elders began to murmur, their suspicion turning the air thick and sour. They had only ever known me as Ilara, the broken Omega, the pack's shame, the girl who could only scream in her nightmares. This, my one uttered word, was not a miracle to them. It was heresy. King Kalen ignored them all. His gaze never left mine. He took a deliberate step forward, crossing the wine-stained marble, his boot squelching softly in the mess I had made. He crouched before me, bringing us eye to eye. I was still frozen on my knees, the shards of glass a glittering threat around me. The scent of him was overwhelming, pine needles after a storm, ancient earth, and raw, untamed power. It called to a part of me I didn't know existed, a slumbering beast deep within my soul that stirred for the first time. "Say it again," he commanded, his voice softer now, but no less intense. It wasn't a request. It was a plea from a soul that had just recognized its other half. I couldn't. Fear, sharp and cold, had seized my throat again, locking the words inside. I shook my head frantically, my long, dark hair falling around my face like a curtain. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could disappear, become the ghost everyone already treated me as. A tear escaped and traced a path through the grime on my cheek. A warm, calloused finger brushed it away. My eyes snapped open. He was so close I could see the flecks of gold in his silver irises. "Do not be afraid of them," he murmured, his thumb stroking my cheekbone with a tenderness that made my starved heart ache. Or of me. His gentleness was more terrifying than any blow. Blows I understood. Cruelty was the language of my life. This was foreign. "My king," Valerius's voice was slick with false deference, though fury simmered beneath it. "Allow us to remove this filth from your sight. She is clearly unwell, perhaps possessed. We will deal with her accordingly." "You will do nothing." Kalen's voice dropped, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. He rose to his full, intimidating height, turning his head just enough to pin Valerius with a glacial stare. "You will not touch her. She is under my protection." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "She is my mate, your future queen." The collective gasp this time was sharp, horrified. Celaena looked as though she'd been slapped. She had paraded herself in front of the visiting king for a week, certain he would choose her to be his mate and unite their packs. The thought of me, the mute Omega servant, taking that place was an insult beyond measure. "But she is a cursed, worthless Omega!" Celaena shrieked, her mask of civility shattering. "She cannot even shift. She is nothing." The king's head snapped back toward her, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. The sound was pure predator, and Celaena visibly shrank back, her face paling. "You will address your queen with respect, or you will not address her at all." Without another glance at the stunned assembly, he turned back to me. He held out a hand. "Come, Elara." My name. He knew my name. I had no idea how. In this pack, I was usually just girl or Omega or worse. Trembling, I stared at his outstretched hand. It was large, scarred, a warrior's hand, but it was offered to me with a steadiness that promised safety. After a lifetime of being pushed down, of being worthless, of being silent, someone was asking me to rise. Slowly, hesitantly, I placed my small, trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and he gently pulled me to my feet. He kept my hand in his, an anchor in the swirling storm of my emotions. He led me from the hall, his guards falling into formation around us. The eyes of my pack followed me, a mixture of hatred, disbelief, and a new, unfamiliar flicker of fear. I was no longer just the Omega they could kick and abuse. I was the Alpha King's mate, and I had no idea what that meant, for me or for them. The royal encampment was a world away from the drafty, cold servants' quarters I called home. It was a city of luxurious tents, silk banners fluttering in the wind, and the hum of disciplined energy. I was taken to the king's personal tent, a structure so vast it was more like a portable palace. Rich carpets covered the floor, a large bed was piled high with furs, and a fire roared in a bronze brazier, chasing away the evening chill. Kalen dismissed his guards with a flick of his wrist, leaving us alone. The silence that fell was heavy, charged. He still held my hand, and I could feel the nervous tremor that ran through me. He led me to a plush divan near the fire and sat, gently pulling me down beside him. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his silver eyes searching my face, my arms, my tattered servant's dress. I shook my head, my throat still tight. He sighed, a sound of frustration and something else, pain. "I need you to speak to me, Ilara. I need to hear your voice again. Please." I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to. For 10 years, words had built up inside me like a dammed river, a raging torrent of thoughts, feelings, and screams that had no outlet. But the curse was a physical thing, a knot of old, dark magic tangled around my vocal cords. The shock of the mate bond had allowed one word to break free, but now the knot was tightening again, choking me. I opened my mouth. I tried. I focused on a simple word, yes, but only a choked gasp came out. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes. I shook my head again, pulling my hand from his to press it against my throat, a gesture of helplessness I had repeated 1,000,000 times. His expression hardened slightly, not with anger at me, but at the situation, at whatever had silenced me. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I couldn't answer. The story was trapped inside me. It was the story of the night the forest burned, the night the screaming didn't stop, the night a woman with eyes like chips of obsidian whispered an incantation over me as my parents' bodies lay cooling nearby. Morwen. Her name was a scar on my soul. Seeing my distress, Kalen reined in his intensity. He reached out and took my hand again, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on the back of it. "It's all right. We will figure this out. I will have my healers, my shamans examine you. Whatever this curse is, we will break it." His confidence was a bomb, but it couldn't erase a decade of ingrained fear. The healers of my pack had tried and failed. They had declared me broken, a lost cause. The idea of anyone succeeding now seemed impossible. A servant entered with a tray of food, roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, and fruit. It was more food than I usually saw in a week. My stomach rumbled, a sound of profound embarrassment. Kalen's lips twitched in a ghost of a smile. It transformed his harsh, regal face, making him look younger, almost approachable. "Eat," he said gently. "You're too thin." He was right. Valerius and his family ensured the Omegas were fed last and least. I ate ravenously, unable to remember the last time I'd had a full meal. Kalen didn't eat. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. The intensity of his gaze made me self-conscious, and I slowed down, trying to eat with a decorum I'd never been taught. When I was finished, a female servant came to lead me to a separate chamber within the tent. It had a basin of warm scented water and clean clothes laid out on a small bed. Not a fine gown, but a simple, soft tunic and trousers of fine wool. It was the greatest luxury I had ever known. After I washed away the grime of the kitchens and changed, I felt almost human. When I emerged, Kalen was standing by the entrance of the tent, looking out at the moonlit night. He turned as I approached. His eyes swept over me, and I saw a flicker of raw hunger in their silver depths that made my breath catch. He was devastatingly handsome, I realized. Not just powerful, but beautiful in a fierce, masculine way. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, emphasizing the sharp lines of his cheekbones and jaw. Scars marked his brow and the side of his neck, testaments to battles won. "My beta, Garrick, has confirmed it," he said, his voice quiet. "Your parents, they were the shamans of the Blackwood Pack, Lyra and Ronan, Powerful healers. They died defending the pack from a rogue attack 10 years ago. I flinched at their names, a fresh wave of grief washing over me. I nodded, my eyes stinging. The records say you were found days later, hiding in the woods, traumatized into silence. He took a step closer. But it wasn't trauma, was it? It was a curse. I nodded again, my heart pounding. He knew. He was putting the pieces together. Alpha Valerius took over the pack after your parents' death, Kalen continued, his voice hardening. He has not treated you well. It wasn't a question. He had seen the fear in my eyes, the way I flinched, the worn thin dress and my gaunt frame. I looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The shame of my existence, of my weakness, was a heavy cloak. "Look at me," he commanded. I did. "None of that was your fault. The abuse you endured ends now. I swear it on my life." His vow was so fierce, so absolute, it stole the air from my lungs. No one had ever defended me. No one had ever cared if I lived or died. The sheer force of his protectiveness was a tidal wave, and I felt myself drowning in it. He must have seen the turmoil in my face because he softened his tone. "I must attend the council. The alphas of the other packs are here. They will have questions. Valerius and his ilk will be spreading poison about you. I must control the narrative." He hesitated. "Will you be all right here? I will post my most trusted guards outside. No one will enter. No one will harm you." I gave a small, jerky nod. He reached out, as if to touch my face, but then seemed to think better of it and let his hand drop. The distance between us felt charged, a chasm of unspoken questions and a terrifying magnetic pull. "I will be back soon," he promised, and then he was gone. Alone in the opulent tent, I sank onto the furs of the bed, my body trembling. One day, in one single day, my world had been turned upside down. From a silent, abused servant to the mate of the Alpha King. I should have been happy or relieved, but all I felt was a profound, bone-deep terror. I was an imposter in this life. I had no voice, no power, no grace. Selena was right. I was nothing. How could I ever be a queen? Kalen was a king, a warrior, a leader of wolves. He needed a strong mate, a powerful Luna. Not me. The doubt was a cold poison seeping into my veins. Valerius and Selena would not let this go. They would find a way to discredit me, to destroy me. They would tell Kalen I was a liar, a defective Omega, a witch. And why shouldn't he believe them? All the evidence pointed to it. A girl who suddenly speaks after a decade of silence, at the precise moment the most powerful man in the world declares her his mate? It sounded like a carefully constructed plot. My hand went to my throat again. The curse felt like a physical weight, a cold hand squeezing, daring me to try and speak again. I was trapped. Kalen had offered me a lifeline, but it felt like a gilded cage, one where the expectations would crush me just as surely as Valerius's fist. I curled into a ball on the massive bed, the scent of the Alpha King all around me on the furs, and for the first time in 10 years, I cried not silent tears of despair, but ragged, choked sobs of sheer, overwhelming fear. He would realize his mistake. He would see me for the broken thing I was, and he would reject me. The thought was more painful than any beating I had ever endured. The mate bond, a fragile, nascent thing, already felt like it was fracturing under the weight of my own inadequacy. The next few days passed in a blur of surreal luxury and suffocating anxiety. Kalen was true to his word. I was attended by servants who treated me with a gentle deference that made my skin crawl. I was given beautiful clothes, nourishing food, and soft places to sleep. But it all felt borrowed. I was a crow dressed in a swan's feathers. Kalen spent most of his time in council meetings or diplomatic spars with the other alphas. I knew, from the grim set of his jaw when he returned to the tent late at night, that it was not going well. Valerius and his allies were sowing dissent, painting me as a creature of dark magic, a danger to the stability of the packs. "They demand proof," Kalen told me one night, pacing the tent like a caged lion. "Proof that you are not what they say. Proof that the mate bond is real. They want you to speak before the council, to tell your story." I shrank back, my whole body shaking. The council. A room full of powerful, judgmental alphas, all staring at me, waiting for me to perform a miracle I couldn't control. The very thought made the curse tighten its grip, stealing the air from my lungs. I can't," I managed to get out, the words a raw, painful scrape. It was the most I had said at one time, and it exhausted me, leaving my throat feeling like it was full of sand. Kalen stopped pacing and came to me, his expression softening as he saw my terror. "I know," he said, his voice dropping. "I am not asking you to. I am telling you what they want. I will not force you." He sat beside me, his thigh brushing mine. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through me. "But I need your help, Alara. I need something. A name. The one who cursed you. Anything." I looked into his silver eyes and saw the immense pressure he was under. He was defending me against the world, staking his reputation, his kingship, on a mute Omega he barely knew. The debt I owed him was terrifying. Taking a shuddering breath, I focused all my will. I pictured the woman with the obsidian eyes, the sneer on her face as she whispered her foul magic. I opened my mouth, pushing against the resistance in my throat. "More. When?" I rasped, the name tearing from me like a thorn. Kalen's eyes sharpened. "Morwen? Who is she?" I shook my head, unable to say more. Tears of frustration streamed down my face. I grabbed a piece of charcoal from the brazier and a spare piece of parchment from a nearby table. My hands trembled, but I managed to sketch a face from memory. Sharp, cruel features, dark hair, and eyes that held no light. Underneath, I wrote her name. Then I drew the symbol she had worn on a pendant around her neck, a twisted, thorny vine encircling a dead raven. Kalen studied the drawing, his jaw tightening. The Shadow Vine Coven, a rogue sect of witches who deal in blood magic. They were thought to be wiped out decades ago. He looked up at me, a new, dangerous light in his eyes. "This changes things. This is not just a personal curse, Alara. This is a political move. The Shadowvine were mercenaries. Someone hired Morwen to curse you, to silence you after your parents were killed. Someone who didn't want the daughter of two powerful shamans to come into her own power." My blood ran cold. I had always assumed the curse was a simple act of cruelty. I never imagined it was part of a larger conspiracy. "We need to find her," Kalen said, his voice grim. "She holds the key to breaking your curse and to exposing who was behind your parents' murder." He began to spend more time with me, trying to coax words from me, not with pressure, but with patience. He would tell me about his own kingdom, the vast forests and snowy mountains, the loyalty of his people. He asked me questions, simple ones at first, and he would wait, his gaze unwavering, for me to try and answer. Slowly, Painstakingly, a few more words began to break free. Yes, no, water, tired. Each one was a victory, but a costly one, leaving me drained and my throat raw. Yet with every word I spoke, I could feel the mate bond strengthening between us, a shimmering thread of gold weaving our souls together. One evening, he found me by the small stream that ran behind the encampment. I was tending to a young fox with a wounded paw, using some of the basic healing knowledge my mother had taught me through gestures and pictures before she died. I had created a poultice of river moss and yarrow and was gently wrapping the fox's leg with a strip of linen. Kaelin watched me in silence for a long time. When I finished, the fox licked my hand before hobbling off into the undergrowth. "You have your mother's gift," he said, his voice full of a soft wonder. I looked up at him, surprised. I managed a single hoarse word, "Little." "A little is more than nothing," he countered. He sat on the bank beside me. "You are not nothing, Elara. You are not weak. You are a survivor. Everything they tried to do to break you, and you are still here. You still have a gentle heart." He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my skin. "You are the strongest person I have ever met." Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time, they were not tears of fear or frustration. They were tears of a strange, burgeoning hope. He saw me. Not the cursed Omega, not the political problem, but me. And in his eyes, I was not worthless. But our fragile peace was not to last. The next day, a royal artifact was stolen from Kaelin's tent, the Talon of Andrus, a ceremonial dagger passed down through generations of Alpha Kings. An uproar ensued. A search was conducted, and the dagger was found not among the tents of the other Alphas, but tucked beneath the furs of my bed. I was dragged before the council, which had been convened in an emergency session. Valerius and Selena were there, their faces masks of triumphant vindication. "We told you," Selena cried, pointing at me. "She is a thief and a witch. She was trying to use the dagger in some dark ritual. She is working with the enemies of the king." The other Alphas murmured their agreement, their faces grim and suspicious. The evidence was damning. I was the only one with unsupervised access to the king's tent besides Kaelin himself. "Elara?" Kaelin's voice was strained. He stood before the council, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. He looked at me, his silver eyes searching for an answer, a denial, anything. "Did you do this?" I shook my head frantically, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to speak, to defend myself, but the shock and fear had resurrected the curse in its full, choking power. No sound would come out. I was silent again. Utterly, horrifyingly silent. "She does not deny it," Valerius boomed. "Her silence is her confession." "That is not true!" Kaelin's voice cracked like a whip. He was defending me, but I could see the doubt starting to creep into his eyes. The pressure was immense. His own people were questioning his judgment. Then a new figure stepped forward from the shadows. A woman, cloaked and hooded, acting as an advisor to a rival Alpha. She pulled back her hood, and my blood turned to ice. It was Morwen. Her obsidian eyes met mine, and a cruel, triumphant smile played on her lips. She looked older, her face lined with the harshness of her dark magic, but it was unmistakably her. "My lords," she said, her voice like honey laced with venom, "I am a humble practitioner of the old ways. I can feel the aura of deceit radiating from this girl. Alpha Valerius speaks the truth. She is steeped in a dark, manipulative magic. She has fooled our noble king with a glamour of helplessness. She was turning my own curse, my own weakness against me. The irony was so bitter it tasted like ash in my mouth. Kalen stared at her, then back at me, his face a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. He was a king, trained to see plots and deception everywhere. And I, with my sudden voice, my mysterious past, and the stolen dagger found in my bed, looked every bit the part of a conspirator. "Tell me it's not true, Ilara," he pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper only I could hear. I tried. I fought against the magical chains on my tongue with every fiber of my being. I clawed at my own throat, tears of impotent rage streaming down my face. But nothing came. Only silence. A terrible, damning silence. The pain and doubt in Kalen's eyes were like a physical blow. He saw my silence, my frantic, witch-like desperation, and he saw the calm, collected accusation of Morwen. He saw the damning evidence of the dagger. The mate bond, that beautiful, fragile thread, was stretched to its breaking point. "Perhaps," he began, his voice heavy, defeated. "Perhaps I was a fool." He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the council, at the floor, anywhere but at the girl he had declared his queen. Perhaps the bond was a trick of the senses, an illusion created by a witch. His words, though spoken to the council, were aimed at me, and each one was a dagger to my heart. He didn't believe me. He had chosen his duty, his logic, his kingdom, over the instinct of his own soul. He had chosen to believe the lie. The ache of his rejection was 1,000 times worse than the original curse. It was a shattering of my soul, a final confirmation of what I had always believed. I was unworthy, unlovable, broken. A cold numbness spread through me. The fight went out of me. The curse, fed by my utter despair, slammed back into place, not as a knot, but as a wall of solid ice. I knew, with a dreadful certainty, that I would never speak again. Heartbroken and empty, I turned and fled. I didn't wait for his judgment, for the guards to seize me. I ran from the council tent, from the man who had given me a glimpse of hope only to snatch it away, from the life that was never meant to be mine. No one stopped me. My flight was just another admission of guilt. I ran into the dark woods, the laughter of Morwen echoing in my ears, leaving behind the shattered pieces of my heart and the king who had rejected his mate. The forest that had once been my refuge now felt like an extension of my prison. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing onto a bed of damp moss beneath an ancient oak. The silence was absolute, both inside and out. The despair was a living entity, a cold predator wrapping itself around my soul, squeezing the very life from me. The nascent mate bond was an agonizing wound, a constant, throbbing reminder of Kalen's rejection. It felt as if a part of me had been violently torn away, leaving a raw, bleeding void. Days blurred into a haze of misery. I survived on berries and roots, my senses dulled by grief. My inner wolf, which had stirred with Kalen's presence, had retreated into a deep, wounded hibernation. I felt more broken than ever before. The curse was stronger, colder. Sometimes I would open my mouth to the empty woods and try to scream, but not even a whisper of air would escape. Morwen had won. Meanwhile, back at the encampment, Kalen was living in his own personal hell. The moment I fled, the agony of the broken bond had slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. His wolf was raging, clawing at the inside of his skin, howling for its mate. His heart, which he had guarded so carefully his entire life, felt like it had been ripped from his chest. Doubt, sharp and poisonous, began to eat at him. Had he been right? Or had he just made the most catastrophic mistake of his life? His beta, Garrick, a grizzled wolf with wise eyes, found him staring into the fire, the stolen dagger in his hand. "You don't believe she did it," Garrick stated, not a question. "The evidence," Kalen began, his voice raspy. "Evidence can be manufactured," Garrick countered. "Think, Kalen. A mute, abused girl who has never known a moment of kindness suddenly concocts a plan to steal a royal artifact? To what end? It doesn't make sense. But an old enemy using the girl as a pawn to destabilize you, that makes perfect sense." Garrick's words were a spark in the darkness of Kalen's regret. He looked at the sketch I had drawn of Morwen, which he had kept. The Shadowvine Coven. He had sent his best trackers and scouts to find information, and their reports were slowly trickling in. The Coven wasn't dead. It was resurgent, operating in the shadows, led by a powerful witch named Morwen, and their services were for hire. He started his own investigation, quietly, away from the prying eyes of the council. He examined the dagger, and his keen alpha senses picked up a faint residual scent beneath mine. A scent of nightshade and something acrid, something unnatural. It was the scent of dark magic. It was the scent he had noticed lingering around Morwen. He confronted the servant who had found the dagger. Under the pressure of his alpha command, the young man broke down, confessing that Selena, Alpha Valerius's daughter, had paid him handsomely to plant it. The pieces of the puzzle began to slot into place. Valerius and Selena, desperate to secure a royal alliance, had conspired with Morwen. Morwen's goal was twofold: fulfill her contract by ruining me, and, in doing so, gain favor with a potential ally while destabilizing the most powerful Alpha King on the continent. The full weight of his mistake crashed down on Kalen. He hadn't just misjudged me, he had played directly into his enemy's hands. He had rejected his true mate, his other half, based on a lie, leaving her alone and vulnerable in the wilderness. The guilt was a physical torment, far worse than any battle wound. His wolf demanded he find me, beg for my forgiveness, and slaughter anyone who had hurt me. For the first time, the man and the beast were in perfect, violent agreement. "Find her," Kalen commanded Garrick, his voice like grinding stone. "Take every tracker. I want the scent of Valerius and Selena. I want the location of Morwen. And most of all, I want my mate." I had made my way to the ruins of my childhood home, a collapsed stone cottage deep in the Blackwood territory. This was where the curse had been cast, where my life had ended and my silence had begun. I don't know why I came back. Perhaps some part of me needed to return to the source of the pain, to finally let go. I don't know why I came back. I was huddled by the crumbling hearth, tracing the faded patterns on the stone, when a twig snapped behind me. I didn't even look up. I no longer cared. Let the forest beasts take me. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. The voice, dripping with malice, sent a jolt of pure terror through my numb body. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself against the cold stone of the hearth. Morwen stood in the doorway, a predatory smile on her face. "Did you really think you could escape me, little shaman?" she sneered. "The curse I placed on you was a leash. I can always find you, especially when you are this broken." She stepped into the ruins, her obsidian eyes glowing with a faint, malevolent light. The king's rejection was the perfect catalyst. It fed the curse, strengthened it. Soon it will consume not just your voice, but your very life force. I just came to speed the process along." She raised her hand, and black, smoky tendrils of energy began to coalesce around her fingers. Fear, primal and overwhelming, finally broke through my apathy. I was going to die here, just as my parents had. Suddenly, a thunderous roar ripped through the forest, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. A massive black wolf, larger than any I had ever seen, burst through the crumbling wall of the cottage. It was Kalen, in his full alpha shift. He launched himself at Morwen, a blur of fur and fury. Morwen shrieked, throwing up a shield of dark energy. Kalen crashed against it, the force of the impact shaking the very foundations of the ruin. He was thrown back, but landed on his feet, snarling, his silver eyes blazing with murderous intent. "You will not touch her!" His voice echoed in my mind, a telepathic roar that was both terrifying and beautiful. Morwen laughed, a high, piercing sound. "Too late, Alpha King! Your rejection did more damage than I ever could. The bond is fractured. She is mine to break." She flung a bolt of black energy at Kalen. He dodged, but a second bolt caught him in the shoulder. He howled in pain, the dark magic sizzling against his fur, but he did not stop. He charged again, his powerful jaws snapping, relentless in his pursuit. Watching him fight for me, watching him bleed for me, something inside me shifted. The cold despair that had encased my heart began to crack. He had come back. He had been wrong, yes, but he had come back. He was fighting for me. The tiny, flickering ember of the mate bond, which I thought had been extinguished, flared to life, fed by his fierce devotion. Morwen, seeing her magic wasn't stopping him, grew desperate. She turned her attention back to me. "If I cannot have your life, I will have your silence forever!" she screamed, and flung a twisting coil of pure darkness directly at my throat. There was no time to move, no time to think. But as the magic hurtled towards me, a new feeling surged through me. Not fear, not despair, but a deep, primal rage. The rage of a shaman's daughter. The rage of a Luna wolf. The rage of a woman who refused to be broken. The love I felt for the wolf fighting for me, the agony of the bond we shared, the memory of my parents' sacrifice, it all coalesced into a single point of brilliant, white-hot power deep within my chest. The power my parents had died to protect. The power the curse was meant to suppress. As Morwen's magic was about to strike, this power exploded outwards. It was not a scream, but it was a sound. A pure, resonant note of command that vibrated with the life force of the earth itself. It shattered Morwen's dark magic into a million pieces. And then the words came. "Enough!" My voice. It was not a whisper. It was not a rasp. It was a force of nature. Clear, strong, and humming with an ancient power. The curse, the wall of ice around my soul, shattered. Morwen stared at me, her face a mask of shocked horror. Impossible! I rose to my feet, my body thrumming with energy I didn't know I possessed. I could feel the life in the trees, the water in the ground, the strength of the stones around me. It was my heritage. It was my birthright. "You took my family," I said, my voice ringing with authority. "You took my voice. You will take nothing else from me." Kalen, momentarily stunned, stared at me with awe. He could feel my power through the bond, a radiant, healing warmth that was the perfect counter to Morwen's dark, corrupting energy. I lifted my hand, and the green vines that clung to the ruins began to writhe and grow, shooting towards Morwen like serpents. They wrapped around her arms and legs, holding her fast. She struggled, cursing, but the raw, natural magic flowing from me was stronger than her twisted spells. I walked toward Kalen, whose shoulder was still smoking from the magical wound. I placed my hand over it, and the power within me flowed into him. I wasn't just a shaman's daughter, I was a healer. The dark magic dissolved under my touch, and the flesh began to knit itself back together. He shifted back into his human form, his magnificent body naked and scarred, his silver eyes full of a love and reverence that took my breath away. "Elara," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. I gave him a small, watery smile, then turned my attention back to the trapped witch. "The curse is broken, Morwen. Your power over me is gone." "You will pay for this!" she shrieked. "No," Kalen said, moving to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. "You are the one who will pay." He looked down at me. "She is yours to judge, my queen." My queen. He said it with such profound certainty. I looked at the woman who had caused me a lifetime of pain. I could destroy her. The power humming in my veins told me I could. But my parents were healers. They were givers of life, not takers. "You will live," I told Morwen, my voice steady. "You will live, and you will be stripped of your magic. You will spend the rest of your days in silence, just as you forced me to. You will feel what it is to have a mind full of screams and a mouth full of dust." I closed my eyes, focusing my will, and drew the dark magic out of her. It fought me, but my power, anchored by the love of my mate and the strength of my bloodline, was absolute. Morwen screamed as her magic was torn from her, leaving her a hollow, powerless shell. Kalen's guards, led by Garrick, emerged from the trees at that moment, having followed their king. They seized the now catatonic Morwen, as well as Valerius and Selena, who were found hiding nearby, their plot completely exposed. The danger was over. The forest was quiet again. Kalen turned to me, his eyes full of unshed tears. "Elara, can you ever forgive me?" he asked, his voice raw with shame. "I doubted you. I hurt you. I rejected you. It is a crime for which I will never forgive myself." I looked into the eyes of the king who had crossed a continent to find me, who had battled a witch for me, who had called me his queen even when I was a broken shell. I lifted my free hand and gently cupped his jaw, my thumb stroking the rough stubble there. "You came back," I said, my voice soft but clear. "That is all that matters." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch like a starving man finding sustenance. He pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me, holding me so tightly I felt my feet leave the ground. He buried his face in my hair, and I felt the tremor that racked his powerful body. "I love you," he whispered into my hair. "I love you, Elara, my mate, my Luna, my voice." And in the ruins of my past, surrounded by the forest that had witnessed my deepest sorrow, I held my king and finally felt whole. "I love you too, Kaelin," I replied, and the sound of my own voice speaking those words was the sweetest magic of all. We returned to the encampment not as a king and his problematic mate, but as a united force. The council was reconvened, and this time I stood beside Kaelin, not behind him. I told them everything. My voice did not waver. I spoke of the murder of my parents, the curse of Morwen, and the conspiracy orchestrated by Valerius and the rival Alpha who had hired the witch. The evidence Kaelin had gathered supported every word. Valerius and Selena were stripped of their rank and exiled, their pack put under the temporary stewardship of Kaelin's beta. The rival Alpha, faced with indisputable proof of his treachery, was forced into a humiliating treaty, ceding territory and power. My name was cleared, but it was more than that. I was no longer seen as a weakness, but as a source of immense, untapped power. A Luna Queen to be respected and perhaps even feared. That night, back in the royal tent, the weight of the past weeks finally settled. The tension, the fear, the heartbreak, it all receded, leaving a quiet, peaceful stillness in its wake. Kaelin and I sat by the fire, my head resting on his shoulder, his arm securely around me. "I never tire of hearing it," he murmured, his lips brushing against my temple. "Hearing what?" I asked, my voice still a wondrous novelty to my own ears. "Your voice," he said simply. "Tell me something, anything. Tell me about your favorite color. Tell me a memory of your mother." And so I did. I talked for hours, my voice flowing like a river finally freed from its dam. I told him about my mother's garden, about the songs my father used to hum. I told him about the 10 years of silence, the observations I'd made, the stories I had crafted in my head with no hope of ever telling them. He listened to every word, as if it were the most precious treasure, his silver eyes never leaving my face. He showed me the depth of his remorse not in grand apologies, but in small, reverent actions. The way he would pause what he was doing just to listen to me speak. The way his hand would always find mine. The way he would look at me when he thought I wasn't watching. His face filled with a love so profound it made my heart ache in the most wonderful way. He was a king, fierce and powerful, but with me he was gentle, patient, and utterly devoted. And I, who had been a trampled Omega, found my strength not just in the shamanic power that had awakened, but in the unconditional love of my mate. Later, we stood on a low hill overlooking the sleeping encampment, the moon full and bright above us, bathing the world in a silvery glow. Kaelin pulled me back against his chest, wrapping his arms around my waist. We stood in comfortable silence for a long time, simply breathing together. "I used to hate the moon," I whispered, looking up at the glowing orb. "It saw everything that happened to me. It was a silent witness to all my pain." Kaelin's arms tightened around me. "And now?" I leaned my head back against his shoulder and smiled, a true, happy smile that reached my eyes. I thought of the journey, the pain, the silence, the rejection, and the fierce, redeeming love that had brought me here. I thought of the future, a future where I had a voice, a home, a purpose, and a king who cherished every word I spoke. "Now," I said, my voice clear and steady in the moonlit night, "it feels like it's watching over us." He turned me in his arms, his silver eyes glowing with the moon's reflection and the depth of his love for me. He lowered his head and kissed me. A kiss that was not about feral passion, but about promise. about healing, about two fractured souls finding their home in one another. And in that kiss, under the watchful eye of the moon, I knew my silence was truly over. A new life, a life full of love and laughter and endless conversation, had just begun.